All right, so we are in Matthew. Last week we looked at the Sermon on the Mount quite a bit, but we didn't make it through chapter 7. So we'll start Matthew chapter 7, and then we've gone through in our readings through Matthew chapter 12. So let's go ahead and start with 7 and work our way across. As we're doing this, I want to invite people to be thinking about what you can say or how you could share. For me, when we do Bible study, a big portion of the reason we do Bible study is to help us not only to be smarter, but to be able to be more faithful in our walk with Jesus, in opening our lives to be instruments of God's grace and peace and love in the world, bearers of the good news. And so I want us to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about how the study is helping us. What did we read this week that helped us with our journey? But we're gonna, and so we'll come back to that. I'm just giving you a little heads up. So if something clicks in your brain, you might go, oh yeah, I could talk about that later. But let's go ahead and start with Matthew chapter 7, which I find to be a fascinating list of teachings. There was, in my translation, there, which is the NRSV, the one I'm reading, has a list of like judging others, profaning the holy, ask, search, knock, like this whole list. In the Message, it says, a simple way to live, or something like that. I was like, well, there you are. Really, this is all Jesus's teachings, and it's not just designed to for us to go, oh yeah, that's a good idea, right? It's not something that's supposed to just be intellectual, but it's actually supposed to be put into practice. Right? That these are like spiritual disciplines, or a way to actually put things into practice. So let's jump in. What kind of things did you especially like so Robin's saying there's somebody at her door. She'll be back in just a little bit. What did you guys find that was challenging or uplifting or encouraging, that you especially wanted to look at in chapter 7?
Is somebody knocking at the door? Is that what you just said?
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because she's way out in the country, so I hope it's all good. So, okay. Chapter 7.
Well, verse 7 talks about knocking, so that's why I threw that out. So,
Oh, you know what? That's very, thank you, Dave. Very timely. Very. And so hopefully, knock and the door will be open and all will be well. And yeah.
Well, I find Matthew to be a difficult, one of the more difficult gospels for me. A lot of talking of, I would say that it's one of the favorite books for the evangelical Christians, unfortunately, in my opinion. In that evil spirits and cause everything, cast out the evil spirits. Especially chapter 10 was very difficult for me to read through. It just, I don't know, brings up a lot of stuff, maybe of old things. But in chapter 7, there's like, starts out, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. And I love that verse. I've had that memorized in the past for many times. And then further on it says, but not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. So it's like, ask, but not everybody gets in. So, okay, you're going to ask, but you may not get in.
Well, one of the things that I do want to talk a little bit about, so from this, ask and it will be given, search and you will find, knock and the door will be open. But in James,
he's knocking.
There we are, knocking, right? So in James, we read about when you pray, what you pray for doesn't bring fruition because you don't know how to pray. Right? You pray, one translation says you pray wrongly, right? And so in Paul, I think you might remember, Paul saying that when we pray, we're supposed to be praying to align ourselves with what God is trying to do, right? not praying, telling God how to do stuff, but praying so that we might be aligned with God. So when you pray and you say, God, I want you to do this or that or the other for me, you know, and it doesn't happen, and we might not use those precise words, but when it doesn't happen, when it doesn't come to fruition, it's not because we, you know, what Jesus is trying to say is our every whim isn't part of God's will, right? Our every whim isn't part of God's will. But when you actually are seeking who you really were meant to be, when you're actually trying to discover that and be faithful, and when you have a deep passion that God has placed in your heart, a deep passion, and when you pray, you know, God, I really want to, you know, be famous. I want to be the best basketball player in the whole world, right? Is that all about your glory? Or is it, you know, is it a different, God, I want to be able to serve you. I have this love and passion here. Is this a way I can serve you? Right? Is this something that will happen? So you're seeking, are you actually seeking what God is wanting to show you? Or are you just like, you know, God, that person pissed me off today. Strike them with lightning. Right? It's like, so I'm thinking that I'm thinking that all of this is, you can't take the senses in isolation, right? You can't take it in isolation from other things. And so saying, you know, here's how you live and you don't judge others and you try to, you know, get the log out of your own eye. And, you know, and if you're looking for wisdom, if you're seeking it, God's going to give it to you, right? It's not every whim of your heart. I want to be made queen of the universe, right? So,
Well, I think of Jesus on the cross. I mean, talk about talking to God. He
right,
says, take this cup from me, but you know, hey, your will. And
right.
now
If,
Jesus is the most
if it's
famous
possible,
person who ever lived. So
if it be possible, but not my will, right?
yeah,
So,
careful when you knock, the door may open and you may,
well,
hey,
no, and
I wasn't expecting that.
that is, hi, Karen, it's good to have you here. That is,
Hi, sorry for being late. Just got out of
that's right.
class.
Grateful that you can join us.
Oh,
Are,
good.
are you driving home right now?
I am.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for a lot of Christians, and David, you're touching on a real issue right there. Actually, for a lot of Christians, like we know how the story ends, right? And before the very end, before that big triumphant resurrection sort of thing, there's this whole really painful flogging and, you know, crucifixion thing that we're not too fond of. And so
Oh, yeah.
so it is a stumbling block for a lot of people. Like, if I really give my life over to God, is that going to happen to me too? Right? But part of what's important in Bible studies such as this, in groups where you can really be honest with people about these struggles, is when people will remind us that, you know, well, if you give your life fully to God, you may endure suffering. That will have meaning and purpose. If you don't turn your life over to God, you're still going to have suffering.
There's going to be suffering.
It's going to be suffering.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you do everything you can to avoid having any suffering, what that actually does is just causes other people to suffer on your behalf. So, you know,
It's a paradox.
right. I had a friend who said, you know, I recognize that we shouldn't be so dependent on fossil fuels, but, you know, I really like to be able to drive my big van everywhere, and I like my gasoline to be cheap. Like, so that was honest. But what does that do? That is causing, you know, people, particularly people in developing nations, are really feeling the impacts of global warming. People in the Middle East feeling the impacts of wars that have been raged so that we have access to oil, right? So it's like I want to be really comfortable. I don't want to have to be, I don't want to endure hardship. I don't want to endure suffering. Somebody else is going to endure it then. Like we either take our share or somebody else is going to carry it for us. And when we take our share, when we accept our share of suffering in an effort to transform our world into a, God's holy realm, the beloved community, our suffering actually has meaning about it. It has purpose.
So before you knock on that door, you better have your story straight.
Well, and then I don't know about you guys, but so many times I thought, oh, this is going to be horrible. And actually God was able to turn it into something amazing. The suffering I thought I would be enduring actually turned out to be not so great. And in fact, often was a much more beautiful story than I would ever imagined.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot. And things that you don't necessarily want to do, it's like, but then it's like the best memory I have. It's like,
Yeah. Just because our imaginations are really good at imagining horrific scenarios.
I've got another
Yeah.
question for you. I have another question for you. I know you enjoy my questions, so keep everything going here.
Gotta add
Chapter
some
7,
spice.
pardon?
Gotta add some spice.
Okay, chapter 7, verse 1, do not judge, or
Right.
you two are going to be judged. Got that.
Right.
Chapter 13, watch out for false prophets. So how are you supposed to figure out that a person is a false prophet if you're not making some sort of judgment about that person?
Okay, so before I jump in, does somebody else have a way that they would like to address this? Okay, just so you know, you're a little bit ahead of us on chapter 13 because that's tomorrow's reading. But
No, that's chapter 7, verse 13.
that was last week's. Yeah, we're just starting it, and chapter 13 is tomorrow, so we're just kind of a little outside the bounds, but it's fine. I'm thinking that the use of the term judge is probably not the same from one sentence to the other,
Oh, like discern versus judge,
right?
making a kind of holier than thou judgment versus discerning something that is less than completely true.
Yeah. Like we are invited continually to listen to things and to seek discernment, right? To discern, to knock, to ask, is this legitimate? Is this good for my faith journey? Is this helpful? Right? Does this promote shalom? Not just for me. Shalom is not an individual thing, right? It's communal. Does this actually help with shalom in our world, right? Or does this just, scratch my itches? Something that I enjoy, but it's not actually addressing the real issues that are going on in my life, in my world. And then the other side of judging is what I think gets a lot of press time, and I think a lot of people in the world grasp the deeper meaning of that first part of chapter 7 much more than many Christians, when it says, don't judge or you will be judged, because don't try to take the speck out of your brother's eye when you have a log in your own, right? And so many Christians, like in the news lately, we have that fine Christian couple down in Florida who were founded Moms for Liberty, and we're all bashing on gay community and really working hard to make life miserable and hard for queer community, and all of it because it was biblical. What they were doing was biblical, and then it turns out through all of that they were having a three-way with another woman. Like, judging,
Wow.
you're actually doing it. You are
Straight out of Corinth, man. Straight out of Corinth.
it's just like, right, and the world sees that, and then it labels all Christians that way. Well, that's how Christians are. But that's that kind of judging, claiming we have some kind of moral superiority, and therefore the laws of the land need to bend this way, except for me. Literally, that's what they were saying, except not when it doesn't apply to me, though, because, you know, for whatever reason, I don't understand the logic of it, but you know, there's a lot of that kind of judging. You know, applying a very superficial and light standard of to condemn other people, but then wanting people to understand the struggles and hardships you're going through. Like, other people are doing that too. I mean, I remember one time, this is just like an example, it's not exactly, but one time the government got shut down because there wasn't a budget. But
I'm
then,
shocked. I'm
right,
shocked.
and then the members of the House voted that they would get their paychecks. And they said, you know, well, how are you? A reporter asked one of the people who voted to say they would get their paycheck, how can you vote to, you know, have your own paycheck, but other people don't get paid? And the person's response is, well, I have bills to pay.
Oh my God.
Right? It's just like that whole, you know, blindness to the rest of the world. I think that's the part, is casting judgment when you have no self-awareness, right? So look at yourself, and you know, and I talked on Sunday. Well, you didn't probably hear it, Paul, although it's recorded, but
I did enjoy your sermon. I like that you were talking about the Gospel of Mark was very interesting. So I was there. I was.
Okay.
You were there.
I knew too. I mean, I wasn't there. I was watching.
Where I would say, you know, when it's you know, you got to forgive people and stuff, and I would look and I would say, you know, okay, I need to forgive this person, God. So just help me understand it. Show me where I do that. And every single time God says, right here, you do it right
Yeah,
here.
I remember that. I remember that. Yeah.
Right. So, but when that happens, that does make it possible. Then I gain this self-awareness, why it would happen for me and how that can happen for this other person. And what's going on that, you know, it's like, oh, I get it now. Right. And so that, you know, recognizing that I have a plank in my eye, I can say, oh, see why you've got a speck in yours, you know. It is a lot easier. So anyway, so I think that the judging versus the discerning, you know, I think they are different. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I see your point of view for sure. I've just been thinking about, I've been paying too much attention to political speeches lately, I think. And
Hey, John's here.
hi, John. Now, speaking of somebody who, you know, you're talking about your friend that uses too much gasoline. John is my hero. Guy, he's got a house that uses solar power, a car that uses solar power. He eats mostly not a lot of animals, and eats a pretty much good diet for the planet. He's my hero. I really, you know, he does everything good. I just really appreciate him. So I welcome John.
Yay.
Yay.
That's embarrassing.
What an entrance.
Well,
Wow.
I'm sorry about, you know, I mean, we were talking about, before you got here, we were talking about somebody that said that a friend of Janet's that said that she didn't want to give up her big SUV because she, you know, for whatever reasons. And I was, when she said that, I was thinking of you, John. So that's why I brought it up.
Like as an example of the opposite, not
Or the opposite. Yeah, the opposite. Exactly. Not as somebody who does that, but as the opposite, right?
Big cars are a security thing. That's a real deal.
Mhm.
Feel safer in a big car.
Sometimes.
Well, that's part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, how about the golden rule? That's next on the
Well,
list here, isn't it?
Isn't that a fun and interesting one? And how would we tweak that? Right? Because right? Treat others as you would want to be treated. But then there's the story of the monkey that was walking along the beach and found a fish. And so there's like, oh my gosh, this fish is almost at the water. It's going to drown. Let me put it up in the tree. If I would want somebody to do that for me, I'll put, so it's okay. So we don't need to treat them exactly the way that we would want, right? It's like the underlying motivations, maybe, right? We say that because you want to treat people with respect, right? You want to show them courtesy. You want to have them feel safe, right? But they don't have to feel like my husband absolutely loves his coffee, and he would be happy to serve me coffee every morning. I hate coffee. I don't want to have him bring me a cup of coffee every morning. Worst way to start the day ever. Right? So you don't want to be, it doesn't have to get down to the minutia of life, but that underlying foundation and motivation, I'm thinking, right? What do you guys think?
Well, I think that you're getting a little too specific with it, but I mean,
Right.
to treat somebody as you want to be treated would be, you would want somebody to bring you your favorite hot drink in the morning, and for you it would be tea, and for him it would be coffee. So I think you can,
Right. But when people, going back to what Pastor Peter was talking about a couple of weeks ago, the whole concept of taking everything very literally, right? So do unto others what you want done to you, right? Okay, I want coffee every day. I mean, there's people who think that literally.
okay, I see
What
what
I'm
you're
trying to
saying.
say is that the people who wrote it weren't thinking that literally, right? And the people who take it very literally are often criticized by people who are taking it very literally, but coming up with a different meaning, sort of thing. So, so anyway, but yeah. How much?
I was in some kind of a work training thing years and years ago, and this whole subject kind of came up as well. And there was something that I hadn't heard of before called the platinum rule, which is a variation on the golden rule. And that is treat other people as they would want to be treated.
There you go. As they would.
But that
Even
requires some
better,
work, because then you've got to find out what it is that they want. And I think this had something to do with sales, I think. So, let me couch it in that, work related thing. Find out what the customer wants and give it to them. So something on that order. The platinum rule.
Right.
And Jeff Bezos discovered that secret. It was the buy now button. Buy now. That's what people wanted.
So in the message it says, ask yourself what you want people to do for you, then grab the initiative and do it for them. I don't know. What do you think? Does that capture it, or can you put it in a different way?
Wow.
Because I don't necessarily think it's just about doing, right? I mean, I guess showing people respect and creating a place where they feel safe is a doing. But I feel that's more about a being.
Yeah, maybe that's part of it too, though. The being is important, not just the doing. Yeah, because you wouldn't want someone doing it and their heart's not in it. Like,
It goes back to, 1 Corinthians 13, if I do all these really good things, but it's not from love, then it doesn't actually end up gaining anything.
oh yeah,
Accomplish any good.
yeah.
If I bring you your coffee in the morning and then say, wake up, stupid.
Exactly.
And drink your coffee. What do you have to drink your coffee?
It doesn't, I'm just a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go ahead. We've got about a little over 20 minutes left. Let's jump into some of the other chapters. What else in chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? What other kinds of things did you see? There's some great chapters, oh, Robin, you're back. Yay. Robin, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry. I had to call my neighbors. Some people were trying to break into my gate,
Oh dear.
and
Oh my
we had to
gosh.
pull martial law out here.
Wow.
and terrify
Man.
them and
Oh my
tell them
goodness.
they can't get
Holy cow.
in and
Wow.
take pictures of their license and threaten to call the cops. And but I have two neighbors that come up in their trucks and they just block them in.
Wow.
And then
Gee whiz.
we tell them this is private property and we can't, they're, I don't have a choice. I'm by myself. If I don't stand up, they'll roll over me. He broke my gate 3 times.
Oh my gosh.
Tonight, I caught him trying to do it again. Only this time we put a super duper thick chain up
Mm.
and a lock that's made out of titanium stuff. So he can't break anything. But he was pounding on the door trying to get in the gate, and I told him, no, I'll let you in, but I'm not giving you the combination. So
Wow.
anyway,
Exciting. Well, I'm glad you're.
they're unsavory characters, as Paul would say,
Mhm. Okay.
you know.
Well, I was just getting ready to
So
say
anyway,
that one of the things in particularly in chapters 11 and into 12, there's some areas in which what Jesus was saying can be a little bit confusing, controversial. I was reading stuff and I thought, I wonder what other people, how other people understand this. So I consulted commentary, and the commentaries are like, there's a lot of disagreement about what is meaning here. And so part of it is that the reality, when they wrote it, there's no spacing and punctuation. And so we have, along with making chapters and verses, we've added punctuation in there. But even adding punctuation in there doesn't necessarily add inflection. So when we read it, we add inflection. And then the translators' language has nuance, and the translators don't always agree what would be the best word to be used here. And so sometimes that's why we read a variety of translations to try to get more of the nuance of what the original writers were going for. But some of the stuff that I was reading, I was like, wow, that's a really interesting statement. I wonder what other people think, have to say about that. And they're like, people don't agree on what's meant here. Okay, well, it's still 2,000 years later, we're going, oh, I wonder what he really meant by that. But anyway,
That's like the one verse that what makes me think of that on the reading is one fellow said, I'll follow you wherever you go. And Jesus is like, the Son of Man doesn't have anywhere to lay his head, And then the very next sentence, somebody says, or Jesus said, follow me. And he's like, okay, I will, but I got to go bury my father or whatever.
Hmm.
And then it was like, and that wasn't right either. He wanted him to follow him now, but it's interesting that they're both kind of,
it seems
anyway, it made me think. I don't know.
I'll follow you anywhere. And then he's like,
well, and he said the dead can bury themselves.
He did.
Right. So in the one, it's like, I'll follow you anywhere. And it sounds like he's trying to discourage the person. Right.
Yeah, that's what kind of, yeah.
It's time. The guy's like, I'm not that interested. Follow
Yeah,
me.
like, I'll do it that first.
Anyway. Right. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I worked for the cemetery, and I've never seen the dead bury the dead. Unfortunately, you need live people to bury the dead.
Ay, ay, ay.
Where it was, where that was in our reading, can you tell us?
No, because I don't have my Bible in front of me. It was
I
like,
remember it too, but I can't find it.
I think it was 8, or I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Let me see. I could find it. Ow, Ben. Ow. And I'm sorry I missed last week because those were my favorite chapters. Is Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount.
On the mount. Yeah.
Let the dead bury the dead. Google is amazing,
right?
Matthew 8:22 is so
Chapter 8
before.
and it's 21, 22.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So then, oh, my Bible keeps moving off the chapter, sorry.
I have a question, another question. And that's chapter 10. Jesus sends out the 12. He says, "Do not go among the Gentiles or into any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel."
Mhm.
I'm just wondering why he would say that. And later on, of course, the Gentiles are welcomed in, but apparently, initially, Jesus was saying they aren't welcomed in until we've given the Israelis their first shot at being part of the new kingdom. But I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
So personally, all through, and this is one of the things I really am encouraging people to take note of as you're reading, all through this, up to this point, Jesus has been healing Gentiles, interacting with Gentiles, lifting Gentiles up as examples in faith, all throughout this. And so to me, I think that maybe that verse was put in there because Matthew was writing to a Jewish group, right? And so, like, yeah, Jesus said, go and just talk to your kin. Don't worry about talking to everybody else. Just start with your own family, start with your, your faith community and see what we can do. But I don't know. I don't understand because Jesus, I mean, all throughout here, almost every time when it labels somebody, not every single time, but almost every time when it labels somebody, it's talking about somebody who's not Jewish. When it's talking about, he went to the Gerasenes. Now you can get that the Gerasenes were not Jewish because they had the pigs, right? So I had a colleague who has a sermon that he keeps, we always talk about the sermon in your back pocket, and his sermon was the Gerasene hog market takes a plunge. It's worth remembering, but yeah, the Gerasenes, those aren't. The centurion wasn't Jewish, goes to heal the centurion's daughter. There's just like throughout this, when in the part where it says woe to these cities, if they'd been like these other cities, those other cities are not Jewish communities. They're not part of the country, the citizens of Israel. All of those examples were not Jewish communities. Throughout this, Jesus is lifting up people who aren't Jewish as examples of faith. People who are not Jewish are receiving the blessings and the healings and saying, like when the guy says, oh, you don't have to come, healer. I'm a boss too. I tell them go and do it, and they do it. All you have to do is just tell them. And he says, man, I've never seen anybody with faith like that. That's amazing. Your daughter's healed, right? It's just like all of these people, these are not Jewish people. And when we read it, because those aren't common terms to us, we often just kind of read over it. Oh yeah, it's somebody. Oh, he healed somebody's daughter. But the people who this book was written to, they were knowing, right? It would be like if we were saying, so the Russian came and said to Jesus, my daughter's sick, right? And wow, I've never found anybody in the United States with faith like this Russian. Right? We would get it right away and in those terms. So he went across to Mexico and he saw that he had been possessed. And after he went back, he crossed back into the United States and found a person who'd been possessed by demons and that kind of stuff. Just most of these people that when it gives an adjective in front of them, almost always the adjective. If it says a Pharisee or a scribe, the adjective is just to help you know the importance of that person in the religious community, right? Where they fall. But if it just says he encountered a paralytic It doesn't say he encountered a Jewish paralytic. He encountered a paralytic, right? Those people, those part of Jewish community. The other ones, when they're telling you who they are, it's because they're outsiders. So just notice how many times that happens. How many times? So many times. So many times. Like we talked about last week at the genealogy, there's only 3 women mentioned, and all of them were outsiders or tainted women, or some of them were both. Right.
Quick addition to the let the dead bury the dead. One source that I was reading says that the man didn't say he was asking permission to literally bury his father, but instead it was to remain in his father's house and to care for him in his dying days. So this could be for an indefinite period, which could drag on. And so the context there was that he was basically saying, we all have to set our priorities. And if this is your priority and this is what you're called to do, then that's what you should do. But to follow me is a different path. And you've got to make a decision here. And if you're not stepping up, then go in peace. But this is the cost of how this is going to work out. So it's I think that's why it sounds confusing to us in the words that were presented, but it's a euphemism basically for I'm caring for elderly folks and that sort of stuff. We're taking it literal. So
also, even that is a little bit like, did Jesus really say we don't need to take care of our aging parents?
Yeah.
Is that really what Jesus says? Because in another spot, then Jesus is like, look at the Pharisees. They tithe on their mint and their spices, and they use that as an excuse not to take care of their parents. She says that. And they use that as an excuse not to take care of their parents, and that is just wrong. So I don't think he was actually saying don't take care of your elderly parents, but the idea, David, of having your priorities, because honestly,
it's a cost. It's going to cost you. Yeah.
My Bible said, my Bible says probably means letting the spiritually dead bury the physically dead. In other words, if you weren't spiritually
interesting,
enthusiastic with Jesus, then you could just stay and bury the dead.
Well, that's an interesting one. I'll have to think on that one for a while.
It said the point is the urgency of the disciples. And they probably were urgent. Jesus only had so much time on the earth.
Yeah, when he said, come and follow me, he didn't mean tomorrow. He meant right now. Drop your nets. We're going.
Yep.
And that would be another thing. It's like when he says, follow me, because, it's not like the fishermen never, ever went back fishing, because they did. But they did a lot of other things. And it's like, let's go get a cuppa, let's go get a cup of something. Well, I need to go do something else first. I'm here right now. I'd love to talk with you about it. Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we think, oh, Jesus, I'll follow you wherever you go. And it's like, will you? I mean, and then, yeah. And then, and then it's like, he also said, it's like that you can, like, we hear his voice, we can come and go. It's like, it's not like this. It's not like you don't have freedom. We have freedom. The pastures, I forget exactly where it says this, but something about they hear my sheep will hear my voice, and then you can go in and out of the pasture, sort of thing. I don't know. Is that something that makes sounds familiar?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I don't want to feel trapped. It's like it's just not human nature.
So this summer, I was at the Ruth Circle last night showing some of the stuff that I got to do in Fiji, and one of the places I was like, we got to go zip lining. And so then And they were like, "Oh, were you scared?" It's like,
Mm.
scared, but we all went to this place. We got a little orientation, and the person's saying, "So you're gonna do like this, and you're gonna do like that, and you've got to do like this to stay safe, and then you're gonna have to walk up these hills to get on, and you're gonna have to go across like this, and then I'm trying to lay out everything that's going to be involved." And then they're like, "So are you, so what do you think?" And I just looked at him and said, "Sounds fun. Let's get started." He's like, "Yay!" Right? So that I don't have any place to lay my head. I like to camp, right? It's okay. Let's do it. Right. So I think, just to say, I don't have any place to lay my head. I don't always know where I'm going to be sleeping.
Hmm.
If that
Oh,
go well, in that case, I don't want to go. Okay. But if you say, well, that's okay. We'll make it work. Then we can work with that. You say, come,
hmm.
come, let's go get a cuppa right now and talk about this. Oh, I have some other errands I need to take care of first. Okay.
Hmm.
Right.
Or I was thinking after I read that, I was thinking, well, Jesus, just come lay your head here with me. You can just
Right. I got a pillow.
take a little break. I'm going to bed.
Right.
Huh.
I got a spare room.
Yeah, I do.
Going back to how you'd want to be treated. I got a
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, anything else? We got just a few more minutes before we're gonna wrap this session up. Delphine, you've been kind of quiet today. What do you want to share with us?
I don't really have, so many of the things are to me are pretty straightforward. So I don't really have too many questions this week about
Huh?
things.
How about you,
I
Jen?
do, but I can't remember what verse it's in, or what chapter it's in, where it talks about Jesus says, to the Samaritan woman, I'm here for the lost sheep of Israel, and we can't toss the dog, we can't toss the children's bread to the dogs.
The Syrophoenician woman.
Right, but I can't remember exactly where that it's in Matthew, but
So
Is
just,
that in six?
again, not Jewish,
right.
right? And her response,
Yeah, I
It's-
liked her response was good though,
yeah. Even
because she
the,
humbled herself. She humbled herself and then,
and then
even the
what?
dogs get the crumbs.
yeah.
I don't find this faith. I don't find this faith other places.
Mhm.
Just right. How many times the Gospels are pointing out that it was the foreigners who heard the good news and received it gladly.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also liked 10:16 because here he is describing what's going to happen to them, and yet trying to convince them that they need to come and follow him. Like they're going to be flogged in the synagogues, you're going to be betrayed. It's a lot for them to think about before they start this journey.
Right. Right. It reminds me very much of the person whose holiday we will be celebrating on Monday, when King Jr. was doing the trainings on nonviolent resistance and teaching people how to sit at the counters, have a sit-in protest at the counters, requesting service, and what the people went through, how they were flogged and beaten and hauled before the judges. And the stories, the testimonies, I was reading one from a person who was in there early on and received the training, and they went and they were hauled out and they were beaten and they were thrown in jail. And then he gives testimony about how they sang their praise to God because they had confronted their worst fears and they had prevailed. Like their spirit wasn't broken. They'd done exactly what they were supposed to do. They never betrayed God's love in any way. They made their statement, and they were alive to tell the story. And then their songs of praise, their gospels that they sang were genuine songs of praise and thanksgiving that God had been with them and had been faithful.
Hmm.
And so this as we read those words, and we might think it's something that happened long ago or something far away, it is something that has happened in our nation in our lifetime. And most of us weren't in the groups, right? Although many of us, perhaps all of us in this group would have been cheering them on. Many of us were not in the marches. We're not putting our lives or our reputations on the line. I was too young, right? I was born in 58. So that portion was over before I reached the age of being able to march in the groups. But my parents got kicked out of Arkansas because they were integrationists.
Had one thought on why the Christians were persecuted so much, because they had so many gods back then. You would think, well, what's the problem with one more god? Why would that cause such consternation amongst the people? I mean, they've had probably 40 or 50 gods. What's another one? Why would that be such a big problem? And then I was reading somewhere that with Christians, of course, they get rid of all the other gods and they'll have one God. But then you have to say, well, why did they have all these other gods? And all these other gods, if you prayed to them, would calm the storm, provide, fertility. That was a big one, obviously. All these different things that these various gods personified in terms of very specific things. And so people had a house god, they had the town god, they had all this kind of stuff. And so the thought being was, if you stop praying to all those gods that provided all these things and just prayed to the one God, you were very likely going to make all the other gods not happy. And so I think there actually were some specific cases where in Christian circles, there was like a drought or a famine, or, stuff happens, right? And so it became a story that it was the Christians that caused this particular thing, because they were no longer honoring the gal who does the wheat or whatever, that kind of stuff. And so it became a sort of a thing that the Christians are causing these problems, and we got to get rid of these guys. And so anybody that's, saying, hey, join the Christian thing, everything's going to be great. Holy smokes, you're going to lose your crops. You're not going to have your kids. I mean, this was a real thing. All these gods were very personal for these people. And so,
and look at what happened to the Christians, and then jump forward 2,000 years. And we have heard people say this in our lifetime, and not very long ago at that. We're having these horrible hurricanes because of the gays.
I missed that one, but it's of the same cloth, right? It's
because of the gays. We're having terrible stuff because of the gays. I even heard somebody recently say, our congregation declining because of the gays. So
well, I was thinking more like when the plague came out. The first thing, when the plague came to Western Europe, the first thing they did is round up all the Jews.
Right.
This was back in 1350.
Right.
Oh man.
The thing is that while it happened to us, that was persecution. When we do it to others, then that's being faithful, and goes back to chapter 7. Don't judge.
Chapter 7.
What happened to you?
It's all there.
Right. So you don't do that. But somehow we missed out. We got that plank. We noticed the speck over somebody else's. I don't know.
It's all about chapter 7.
All about chapter 7. John, did you have anything you wanted to share with us today, or any questions, any thoughts, anything that you really liked?
Actually, I if I summed it up, it would have been all about chapter 7, I think. that idea of don't do that. That's exactly the wrong way to handle it.
Chapter 7. That's a good one. Really is. Chapter 5, 6, and 7. Those are, you could spend a lifetime just trying to live those. Really.
Yeah, I can't read them enough.
Next week is 13, though. 13. There's some meat in there.
On our way.
You've been warned.
Yeah, it gets hard. It gets hard.
Okay, so before we sign off, is there anything going on in the congregations that we want to lift up? Something that's coming up that we want to invite others to join with us? Some of you missed that Robin's preparing a sermon, so if you're not Otherwise engaged on January the 28th at 11 o'clock, you're welcome to go to Forestville for her sermon, her first sermon ever. So
Wow.
if you are engaged somewhere else, you can be lifting prayers for her. So she's been practicing, and we want her to have that peace that passes understanding, guiding her as she shares the message
Wow.
for people to hear. Yay. What else is going on that we might want to lift up? Anything? All right, so let's go ahead. Do we have anybody who'd like to offer our closing prayer this evening as we get ready to sign off?
Next week.
Next week.
I'll do it this week if you want.
Thank you.
Abba, Father, we just come with grateful hearts. Grateful for this group of people, grateful for the congregations that are represented here. And we seek wisdom, discernment, and understanding as we read through the New Testament this year. And I just pray that each one of us, day by day, week by week, will gain discernment and understanding. Grateful for the leadership in this group and in the Methodist Church. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Be well.